Hello, this is Chris Cooper, and a big welcome to the Business Elevation Show on Voice America. Great to be back with you again for yet another episode with another fantastic guest. I'm very excited to introduce to you Zoe Holland MBE, and we're going to be talking about heart-led leadership today, something that is very close to my heart, actually. Um, so before I go into that, just a very brief introduction. My name is Chris Cooper. I'm the host of the Business Elevation Show. We've aired since September 2011, so we're coming up soon to 600 episodes in a few weeks. I develop leaders, teams, and business cultures, and I'm also lead a community called the Elevation Collective, which is full of exceptional heart-led leaders who care about contributing to a better world. On my show last week, I had John Richards, and what a fantastic conversation. I talked with John about raising resilient boys. John is a father, but also he's somebody who helps and leads an organization that works with very disadvantaged people and homeless people. And he runs leadership quests across the globe in the Himalayas and the Sahara, etc. And we had a really thought-provoking conversation about bringing up boys in today's world and the challenges that entails with the likes of social media, for example, and keeping their attention close to you. But I think what John has is an ability to really think at a very, very deep and thought-provoking level. So if you have boys in your family, if you are a parent, I would strongly recommend that you have a listen to that. Alternatively, you might employ young people as well. I would go and listen to that interview. So let me tell you a little bit about my guest today, Zoe Holland MBE. She's the group Chief Commercial Officer at Fletchers Group. She's a legal entrepreneur and is very, very passionate about this concept of heart-led leadership. Um, she has a mantra in that there's no room for ego. She also champions authenticity, inclusivity, and purpose-driven leadership. I think one of the things that I really sense with and know with Zoe is that she has a real heart, and we'll hear a little bit about some of her charitable philanthropic work as well. She was awarded an MBE in the King's Honours in June 2023, which is a really cool thing to be honoured with. But also, I think something that is a reflection of somebody's ability to give and to contribute. Some real depth behind that. And not only that, Zoe uses her professional platform to champion unrepresented groups, including people with disabilities. She's also very passionate about supporting vulnerable women. And at the end of this interview, please stay to the end because Zoe's going to share with us a poem that she's written called The Gift, which I think you'll find very thought-provoking and also very calming as you go into the weekend if you're listening at the weekend. Because Zoe, I think, brings, and I hope you'll hear this through her voice, a real calmness that I've noticed in her and admire. Because when the world is very, very busy and there's a lot going on in the macro environment, you're probably very busy with work and with family, being able to keep a sense of calmness and stillness is really important, I think, and be able to draw some of the insights and wisdom from within, and not just be impacting your mood from what's happening from without. Doom scrolling, for example, would be an example. So let's start, Zoe. I'd love to find out, well, where's home for you, and tell us a little bit about your upbringing and maybe how it shaped who you are today.
Okay, so home, I'm here well, it was sunny Manchester earlier today, but not so sunny now. So I live in South Manchester, and I've lived up here since about the age of 11. So I spent many years up here now. But yeah, my early childhood, I was born in Nottingham, um, in a place called Clifton. Was at the time the largest council estate in Britain. So yeah, it was tough times back in the very early 70s. So yeah, my early upbringing, I suppose, like most people, it was filled with lots of light and some dark shadows along the way. And I think those together have probably shaped where I am today. So in terms of light, I always felt the warmth of my parents, my mum and dad. I felt very loved. There were some key people in my life when I was very young, so I'm pre the age of 8. So that was mum and dad, and also a beautiful lady called Irene, who actually looked after me while my mum worked. And she had a really strong ethic for working, my mum, in those early years, which was unusual for women in the early 70s. And Irene looked after me and was a very caring and compassionate lady. And I'm so fortunate that 30 years later, I remarried in June 23, and Irene is now my mother-in-law.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, so
Oh,
I married
fantastic.
Paul, who, when we were children, we spent a lot of time together because Irene looked after me, and he's a little bit older than me, not too much, but a little. And then I didn't see Paul for 30 years until we reconnected at my father's funeral. And Irene is now my mother-in-law. So that's sort of closing of circle of that love and warmth as I entered into my half a century. Yeah, has been really special, really. So yeah, lots of love and light, and lots of joy and humor. My father was a great comedian. Um, he had lots of funny sayings, and yeah, lots of different funny voices. And my grandma was the same. My grandma Edith, she was a real character. So I remember that humor and the joy of that, particularly at weekends when we were together. Um, and then the sort of the shadow part of my early life would be my mum, my natural mum, Diana. She's really suffered with mental health issues, and was probably about the age of 5 or 6. She attempted suicide um, in a car with my brother and I in the back. Mm. So, I mean, I don't have significant actual visual memories of that particular incident, but I think trauma and grief, I think there was trauma and grief through that period of my life, very young. It's not until you get older you look back and understand what that brings to you in terms of understanding and compassion. I actually think now I'm a bit older and I've had more experience of neurodiversity within my own family. I think she was probably very neurodiverse and really struggled with that. And that gave her some significant mental health issues. But I look back at that time and have real compassion for a woman who was clearly really struggling. Um, Sadly, my mum and my dad, they divorced um, before I was the age of 10, so I was quite young. And because of my real mum's continued mental health issues, very unusually for the 1970s, by now the late 1970s, my dad got custody of both myself and my brother and became our main carer. So my dad became the biggest influence in my life.
Mm.
He was quite a force of nature. He was very small in stature, but huge in personality and resilience. When I spoke at his funeral, my opening words were that he was truly a remarkable man. He started life as a miner at the age of 14 down the pit at Nottingham Colliery. Um, he then, at 14, so to put bread on the table for my grandma and granddad. And then by the age of 17, reaching 18, he was ready and joined the army and spent about 7 or 8 years in the army. And then through his life, having had no education whatsoever in his early life, managed to work his way through life and onto the board of directors at Lloyd's. So he had
Wow.
a massive journey. He was incredibly resilient through that whole process. His determination to make a better life for me and my brother was very much his drive. He had incredible nous and intuition, my father. He understood people and he read situations, but he would really lean into himself and listen to that inner sat nav of himself. And I remember that quite strongly. He always championed the underdog. So along the way, he would meet people, usually men, because his environment was quite male that he worked within, and he would do everything he could to try and help them better themselves and grow as individuals. And I saw testimony to that at his funeral. There were so many people there that my dad had helped along their journey, which was a beautiful thing to witness and feel actually on his funeral. But I think most of all, my dad was unashamedly David. He never ever forgot his roots. He was never embarrassed by them. He truly had no ego. He was humble in lots of ways. So he was a real force of nature for me. And I think a lot of his journey and his incredible resilience, passion, and just drive to grow as a person and make a better life for us, that's probably been the biggest impact on how I approach life and leadership. And when we come to talk about the charity in a little while, the biggest saying that he would always say to me, him and I would have loads of business chats. I'd always phone him and say, I'm struggling, Dad, I don't know what to do about this. And he'd say, Zoe, remember that great big bloody elephant. You can't eat it all at once, just little by little. So yeah, so that's my sort of early childhood and leading into my teens, a real force of nature.
Well, thank you for letting us meet him through you.
Mm. Yeah, he was a yeah, quite a one, I think. Sometimes Marmite, but quite a one.
And what a story that
Mm.
that day. You take me back there to my own father's funeral and speaking at it and the room but actually on that day for you to meet your husband and Irene.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
yeah, there's somewhere in that, I hold that really closely, and my belief is that, my dad intervened in that part
yeah,
of my life and well, he physically brought us together at a funeral, but I don't know, I have real strong feelings that, it was meant to be, which is a lovely thing.
yeah, it's spooky. So tell us from then on what happened with your career because I know you've got a legal background, haven't you? And then you set up your own business and you've now working at Fletchers. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the reason I went into law, I was in my university years, I cleaned for a lovely family in South Manchester, and they had this beautiful 7-bedroomed house. It was enormous, nothing that I'd ever experienced. But I cleaned, and one Friday afternoon I would have half an hour for my lunch. Um, and I opened the Sunday Times supplement, and there was a story on the back. Can you remember there used to be a thing called A Day in the Life of?
Mm,
And there was this page about a lady called Anne Alexander, and she was a lawyer who was one of the first lawyers that actually succeeded in an anesthetic awareness case. And so she was the champion for what we now know as medical negligence in the UK. She was a pioneer in that area of law, and I read about her and thought, I want to do that. Um, so you know, now understanding a little bit about my father's drive, I wrote to this lady. I found out where she worked, and I wrote to her and said, I want to be you, I want to come and see what you do. And she did write back, and she said, well, write to me when you've completed your university and what have you, and we'll see what we can do. But me being me, that not being enough, I hopped into my car and drove to find this woman. on the office door, and there was a lovely lady called Mary Berry, who's still with us. And she said, you can't just see Anne. And I said, but I've come all this way. Anyway, to cut a long story, she saw me, Anne, and that was the start of my legal career. She was she just couldn't believe that this young woman had driven to say, a letter wasn't good enough experience. And so I started my work experience. That's where I got my training contract. And I trained as an injury lawyer, working in catastrophic injury, birth injury cases, clinical negligence. And that was the start of my lawyering, my legal career. And I did that for many years until my daughter was born. She's now 18. And Lorian was very poorly when she was born. And sometimes I call them the shadows, but sometimes out of those dark times and the shadows, other things come and different light comes. And I decided at that point that with Lorian being so ill, being a partner in a law firm, which was what I was at that point, wasn't probably the right journey for me. So I came out of private practice, became a consultant for a period of time, worked at a law firm in Sheffield, became an interim CEO. That law firm was in significant trouble. Part of my role was to try and help them through redundancy, carve out, and a pre-pack. And that is quite a real challenge in leadership when you go through something like that with, I think there was about 150 people within the law firm at that point. But learning how to do that with compassion and with humanity was a real learning curve. But whilst being in that business, a business idea came for me to strike out on my own and set up a business that would value law firms, particularly firms that did injury work. And so Zebra was born. And Zebra was my business for 12 or 13 years.
Mm. So you you mentioned that you want to law to be you believe in law for good. So which is I don't think everybody um, sees all lawyers in that very heart-led kind of space, but you seem to really bridge that because I know you need a lot of technical knowledge to be a lawyer as well, and a lot of communication skills. Um, is law a force for good?
Yeah,
Can it?
yeah. Well, I wholeheartedly believe that. Sometimes it's difficult being an injury lawyer. Injury lawyers do get a bad name. We're sometimes seen as ambulance chasers and all sorts
Yeah,
of things,
yeah,
which I find incredibly sad because, you know, the lawyers that I have had the joy of working alongside for many years, what drives us to do that job is to help other people. We are coming into people's lives and their families at a time of great trauma and grief. People who have suffered significant injury, and all sorts, whether that's brain injury, whether that's spinal injury, or whether it's as simple as, an orthopedic injury. They all can be devastating in their own ways. Um, so, I suppose I have a strong ethic of access to justice, that everybody has the right to that justice. Um, and, in that type of role, it's not just about the compensation. It's actually about how do you rebuild their lives. We become much more than that in that type of role as a lawyer. You are supporting them, you're supporting their family, you're the listener, you're the therapist at times. You become the practical source for them to rebuild their lives. Um, so that part of law for good, yeah, very, very, very much so. I think the other side of it is, as a lawyer, the skills that you learn, um, your organization, your planning, your ability to put reasoned argument forward. Um, I've always felt those are skills that we learn, and I'll talk about privilege probably again, but they're a real privilege. And how do we use those skills we build over the years and use them in a different way? So for me, those skills were being able to work with charities, working with the Child Brain Injury Trust or the Spinal Injuries Association, you know, using those skills, but in a very different way.
Mm.
So
And
yeah.
tell us a little bit about your charitable work, because some of it's quite fascinating.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the Brain Injury Charity and the Spinal Injuries Association, you know, they help those that have severely injured with brain injury and spinal injury. So, you know, that role within those was, you know, more of a fundraising and supporting and signposting people to the right place. Then, as I became later in my career, I was the second female vice president of the Solicitors Benevolent Association, now called the Solicitors Charity. And that was about supporting solicitors in crisis, solicitors who were either in financial crisis, so they would become bankrupt or homeless or whatever that might look like, or were vulnerable in other ways, mental health, domestic violence, all sorts of different areas. And again, you know, using my network as well to really help that charity. And then finally, you know, the charity that's had most impact on my life has been my own. So,
Yeah.
my, yeah.
Yeah, tell us about the hearts.
Yeah. So the heart. So yeah, sadly, my father died in late 2019, and I went away to India in the early part of 2020. And I wanted to mark my father's life, really, was part of it. But the other part of it was through that journey when Dad was really, really poorly. There were so many people that did really simple things that had such a huge impact on us during that time. And one of the most profound moments in that journey, and probably one of the most profound moments of my life, actually, was a moment down in the canteen at the end of my dad's ward. And my dad was on an isolation ward for 4 months. I went to get myself a cup of tea, and a young woman who at that time was about 21, 22, called Katie, very quietly and very silently handed me a handmade heart. And in that moment, the power of that was enormous. It was connection, it was love, it was compassion, it was a moment of I hear you, it was a moment of I understand, it was a moment of I get where you're at without saying absolutely anything. And Katie and I did actually, we became friends, but what I learned that Katie had made this heart herself. So that moment in India when I was thinking, what am I going to do? I decided I want to create a charity and I want others to experience that connection of receiving something as simple as a handmade heart, for them to feel that connection and love and compassion in the same way that I did. And so Silk Elephant was born. And literally a few weeks later, we were into COVID, which was crazy. And the world went mad, as we
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Still do.
And yeah. And so what started as a charity around my kitchen table, so I was like, who can help me? Oh, well, I've got this vision. How the hell am I going to do it? So I grabbed four of my very close friends and said, look, this is what I want to do. How do we do it? And we went from four of us around the kitchen table to within, I don't know, 6 or 7 months, we were a network of over 600 creative volunteers across the UK.
Mm.
Women, a lot of elderly women who were making hearts and other gifts, and we were distributing them. We ended up with 8 kindness ambassadors across the UK that helped a distribution network. And my house was a flood of love, actually. Packets and packets. I mean, the postman just became the friend because he was at the door every day with another. They actually ended up creating a trolley just for the charity to bring. And then we would unwrap them and we'd send some here and some here and some here. So it was quite a huge operation. And over that period, we actually distributed around 110,000 packages to families, bereaved families, families who were separated through illness. So they'd have two hearts, one with the family that was at home and the other with a family in hospital. We reached into Europe, Italy, Portugal, Spain, and we actually were entered into a kindness exchange with a charity in the States. They were writing letters for the elderly. They had a network writing letters. We were creating hearts, and we exchanged letters and hearts. So we distributed letters over here, and they distributed our hearts over in the States. So that experience was phenomenal, and it taught me that really for me has been the biggest journey around leadership.
Mm. It's from a small idea. You really, in a short period of time, you really had to step up, didn't you?
Yeah.
With that network of people, and
People that surround you, that's the the power of community,
mm,
the power of drive, of the passion and purpose that drove all of us that were contributing to the charity. You know, the charity was the seed of my idea. The success of it was the sum of everybody else.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that was the joy. That's the reward and the lives of the people that you touch along the way.
Well, I don't think anybody listening here will, uh, would in any way be able to deny that Zoe is very, very heart-led, and we to the point of um, facilitating the development and circulation of 110,000 hearts across Europe. But what really took out of that conversation was that that deep connection to your father and his qualities, and greater understanding of how legal people do good through their work. Um, Sense obviously about you set up Zebra to do your own work, and then you set up the sort of charities, but hopefully you get a sort of sense of Zoe kind of demonstrating who she is. And after the break, what we'll do is we'll talk just very quickly about Fletchers, because you now have you work for an amazing organization who have a great culture, and we should start to really on tease what is heart-led leadership, what are the key qualities that and the key behaviors of that are heart-led, and what do we need to avoid um, in order to keep that heart-led thread moving forward, and what are the benefits of it, and what are the challenges when you don't have it present. So I think very important conversation after the break. Do join us. I recommend to people that if you're not on the move, that you just take a few notes, maybe take 2 or 3 points from the conversation that could be helpful to you. Because what I really care about, and know Zoe does too, is about amplifying good out there. We need to all be in this period of real change in the world, be thinking about how can we do good? How can we contribute to a better world through our actions, through our businesses, through who we're being? Because right now, it's time for us all, if we've got that potential, to step up and help in some way. So back again with you in just a couple of minutes. Do join us after the break. Hello, this is Chris Cooper, and welcome back to the Business Elevation Show. I'm with Zoe Holland MBE, and we've been talking about heart-led leadership. Before I ask ask Zoe a few more questions, I want to mention Molly because Molly Harvey very kindly introduced us. Molly is a very profound and wise leadership expert. I think she's published about 8 books. She is just somebody who has a very deep and wise soul, I think. And she works. She's a great connector of people. She connects people, I think, based upon energy as well, which I think is a really important part of being heart-led. I think that being able to lean into and feel people's energy. So maybe we'll talk about that actually in a short point. But maybe what you could do with it is just share why you set up Zebra. You sound like you had a lot of success with that, and you moved in parallel to charity work. What made you join Fletchers? Was there a special energy about Fletchers that attracted you to it?
Yeah, there
What do they
was.
do?
So I'd worked with Fletchers as a consultant um, for about 2 years before I was courted in to join them. So I'd worked with the leadership team, the senior leadership team on the board, looking at operation efficiency and strategy and being part of their merger and acquisition agenda. Um, but what actually struck me about that team was, as well as being highly intelligent and extremely ambitious people, they were also just really decent, just really caring, open-minded, compassionate people who had a vision for the business to obviously grow and be extremely successful, but also for a passion for a business to grow and help the people within it succeed and create. I always say about Fletcher's, it feels like a family, and that will sound really cliche, but it's genuinely meant. It genuinely is like that. There is a lot of, as I said, open-mindedness, care and understanding, uh, and curiosity. I think curiosity in leadership is so important, to be open-minded and to be curious why people are the way they are, why do they behave the way they do, what drives them, all sorts of things, but curiosity is a big part of that. So I loved working with them. I suppose with Zebra, I'd got to a point where I'd pretty much done everything that I wanted to do with Zebra. I'd had a phenomenal journey. It was, entrepreneurial. It'd been a blank sheet. I'd created a market within an industry that didn't exist before Zebra. So I'd had enormous success, but it was quite often quite lonely being a single owner
Yeah.
on your and I was ready for something new and a new challenge. And so it's sort of the stars aligned, I think. I'd done this work with them and I ended up away with them on a strategy weekend. And I remember phoning Paul, who's now my husband, saying, I'm here, but there's nobody else external here. And he said, yeah, because they want you to go in-house. And I was, no. But actually, at the end of that weekend, where I'd actually been quite vocal and quite forceful around some of my opinions about Fletcher's, to my surprise, I was asked what would it do to what would they need to do to bring me into their journey. And so there was a little bit of a courtship for a little while I really thought about it. But actually, the main driver of joining, yes, there was a growth story, and I could see where they were going. But actually, it was the people, and a large part of that was the CEO, Peter Hayden. Um, I thought I can learn so much from you as a leader,
Yeah.
as well around business, but as a leader. And so I joined, and it's been an amazing journey, both for the business, but personally for me, being part of that team.
And Fletchers are a fast-growing legal firm. That's correct.
Yeah, so we're a law firm group. So we're predominantly a law firm, but we have a marketing collective that's part of the group. I joined in February 23. We were, around, we've been growing 30% year on year. At that point when I joined, we were about 480 people. We're now just touching 1,200. We've just, at Christmas, we reached north of 100 million. So in the last 2 years, you can understand 30% year on year growth.
Mm.
It is a high growing beast in lots of ways. But it's a joyous journey. Um, we really, as a leadership team, we really look after each other.
Yeah.
But we genuinely have driven a culture of care and support. Um, and new people that come. I mean, I brought various people that I've known throughout my career, peers, into the business. And there's a particular lady called Nadia, and I remember meeting her before she joined, sort of saying to her, I don't think you'll have experienced anywhere like this. Anyway, she joined, and I met her at the Partners Away weekend last year. I hadn't seen her for a few months. And she said, "It really is true. It really is true." And I said, "I know." She said,
Yeah.
"It's like being in work." And I said, "Well, I'm so delighted."
It's
So,
really, yeah, it's really interesting listening to you because I would say with culture, if you can create a culture that where people can really bring their values to work, why
yeah,
would they want to work anywhere else? And you've mentioned in their family, you mentioned decency, open-mindedness, curiosity, care, support, looking after each other. Um, what a surprise that you were growing the company's growing at 30% year on year. If With those kinds of incredible behaviors. So when it comes to heart-led leadership, then are those some of the characteristics you would see in a heart-led leader? Is there a particular value set or set of behaviors that are common in your opinion?
yeah. I mean, there's a reason why I call it heart, and I generally, rather than write heart, I usually put a little heart when I'm writing or thinking about it for myself. That's how I vision it. You know, the reason it's heart-led, for me, the heart represents its humanity.
Yeah,
You know, um, how do we actually really truly look after each other as humans and as individuals? And I think, if organizations don't have that humanity, then I worry how they're gonna grow and succeed in the future. If you think about everything that's going on in the world, if we all just had a little bit more humanity, it might be a little easier. Um, so, in terms of characteristics, I think we've touched on a lot of them. I usually talk about, Chris, the six key elements of what I would term heart-led leadership. Um, the first of those would be, feed your soul. The real importance of finding passion and purpose, when you are truly purpose-led in what you do, um, then there is real joy in what you do. And when you've got that, work doesn't become a chore. It's a good place to be. So it's about feeding your soul, but not just for yourselves. Heart-led leadership is, how do you enable that for the people that work for you?
yeah, yeah,
How do you really listen to what they need, what drives them, and ensure that we can give that? And if not, what role is right for them? We talk a lot in the senior leadership team around the right role for the right people for the right reasons. And we genuinely give a lot of thought to that.
yeah,
And if it's something, and if we have, somebody who it's not where their passion and purpose is, then we do everything we can to help them on their journey to find what is. And that may not be with us, and that's fine.
yeah,
So yeah, feed the soul first. Um, the second one of those would be what I call weave a tapestry. And in that, that's about, first of all, um, the connection. What connection do you bring? How do you connect that community around you? The people that are going to support you, but also the people that you're going to support. and the importance of in that weaving of connection, the curiosity that comes with that, the open-mindedness, the listening, and truly being able to connect before, I always say, connect before you direct, before you ask somebody what you need or want, connect first. What do you really know about them? So would be that. And then the next one, I talked about this on Monday, actually, a women's conference, and I called it Be More Bridget, as Bridget Jones is very topical.
Yeah.
What I actually mean is just be you.
Yeah.
Talk about that authenticity. Be who you are, know and bring your values into leadership. A large part of it, the great and good leaders that I've had the fortune to work alongside, they really know what they're about. They've done a lot of self-reflection, a lot of growth. They've learnt about themselves, all of the good stuff and all of the shitty stuff too. Um, and don't try to conform. We don't actually need to conform. It's okay to bring what you bring. So for me, that's really important. And how do we allow others to do that?
Mm.
Um, and then the next one would be what I call the silent knowing. And that's around really leaning into your inner sat nav, your intuition. And that part of it comes from my experience and understanding of my father's journey. But, true leaders really do lean in and listen to their gut. But again, it's how do we encourage others to do that? And that is by listening, by being able to, allow people to make mistakes and fail. But it's what they learn from that that's really important.
Mm. I mean, one thing I mentioned earlier that you do noticed in you is this calmness and this stillness, and it's that with that silent knowing that listening, leaning into yourself and listening, um, it does require some ability to ground yourself. Otherwise, you can find yourself in your moods and your behavior and your thoughts just being impacted by everybody else around you and not yourself. How do you recommend that people ground themselves? How do you keep that calmness so you can maintain that silent knowing?
Not always come easy, I can say. I think that's been a journey for me over the last 5 years. Um, I think it's about being still, and we're going to probably talk a little bit about that. It's about finding the space to reflect and giving yourself the permission, which so many women often need to do, but giving yourself that time just to step back,
Mm.
perspective. I mean, personally for me, um, that is a daily ritual. Actually finding space and being still. That's meditative. That's physically being out in nature. That's giving myself time to really think what's going on. That's about, for me, building in time for gratitude. Um, yeah, and also being really honest with yourselves when you don't quite get it right. That's also important in that intuition.
Yeah.
It's got to be a real open, raw conversation with yourself.
Mm.
And to do that, you do need a bit of space.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think companies should allow time for people to take an hour of quietness somewhere, or do you think this should always be something we do in our own time?
I don't know. I think, it's a great idea to build in that time. And we do a lot in Fletchers around, we have quiet space. Um, we have masseurs coming in
Right,
to
yeah.
do massage. We have yoga. We have a lot of that type of activity. Um, it may not necessarily be every day, but it's certainly on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
We try and encourage people to take the foot off the pedal. And it's something we do as a discipline at board level. Um, you know, we give ourselves that time and space, and you know, we always start a board meeting with a reminder of positive intent, that we are here with positive intent, because we know we're going to end up getting engaged in potentially some difficult areas of discussion. But we also at the end actually talk about how can we care and support each other, and what do we need to do to look after ourselves.
Yeah.
That is the board item agenda.
Yeah.
Um, so that's how we build it in. What we do in our one-to-ones, we open our one-to-ones with a welfare check-in. That's the first thing we do. Actually, what's going on? How are you?
Yeah.
Not just how are you in work, but actually how are you in the wholeness? I mean, that's something when I was younger, in my 20s and 30s as a lawyer, people didn't talk about home. We weren't allowed to. It was you were seen as uh, not really being great at your job if you needed to come and talk about
Yeah.
home.
There's a line drawn, wasn't there, really?
Yeah.
Mm.
Whereas, we are very much the whole person comes to work. That's who we are. How do you feed your soul if you leave half of it at home?
Yeah.
So we look after and think about that whole person, and do that in a structured way through those types of meetings.
Okay.
We celebrate. We have what we call our um, uh, I can't remember the exact word, but we celebrate moments in people's lives that are really important. We
Mm.
celebrate those. And equally, we also look out for those moments when people are struggling. We have a buddy system. So we have a peer review system, so somebody who is more of your technical, but we also have a buddy system. Your person who's going to make sure you're okay and look after you in that wholeness. So that's how we do it.
Tell me about 5 and 6. I want to make sure there's time for your poem.
Right. Build your raw, okay? As in roar. Roar.
Yeah.
Um, so, and I suppose part of this I learned in the journey of the charity, and part of it in setting up an entrepreneurial business. That real need to lean into the unknowing is really important, because we don't always have all the answers, and we can't always see the vision of what that's going to look like. So I learned to build it slowly. So I didn't always know what was going to come around the corner. I sort of had an idea, and I would lean into my intuition. Um, and then the corner would turn, and you'd be like, that's it. And then there would be the next corner. And so for me, with each corner that we turn in leadership, with each challenge that comes, our raw builds, our confidence builds, until we're ready to walk around that corner and really give it a hearty roar,
Mm.
and know, we've got where we need to be. But then the next journey might start. And so we'll start again. It might start with a little meow and then builds.
Yeah.
Leaning into that unknowing part of things and not knowing all of the answers is
Yeah.
absolutely fine. We
Yeah.
build our roar along the way. And then the last one is be still.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
Led leadership, a critical ingredient is learning how to be still and making that a ritual part of your life, both inside and outside of work.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Excellent. So it sounds like you have the ingredients for a book.
Yeah, I think so, maybe. Thanks, Chris. But yeah, so yeah, I think it's about all of those things. But the seed of it is humanity. We are human. We come as whole people.
Right, I'm going to have to ask you now. You suggested told me that you'd like to share a poem called The Gift. So we've
Okay,
just got time for your poem if you go now.
it's the gift. Women weave life's tapestry, each thread connecting selflessly, loving and giving, planning and doing, mastering our duty, we lead with grace, nurturing those within our lives, queens of action in perpetual motion, woven into every moment. What if we found space to pause, reflect, recharge, honor ourselves, root in our beauty, welcome silence, and mother our heart, body, and soul? In being still, we gift ourselves belonging, a promise of rewilding, renewing like a spring bulb, we flourish, awakening the magic of colour, sweet scent. As we embrace the stillness in ritual, we cultivate the seeds of joy like a summer meadow, bursting into bloom, alive with the warmth of the sun, each moment a flower, nourished by the quiet of our care. And when we return to the stillness once more, we remember, in the pause, we are both soil and the bloom, ever becoming, ever growing, a cycle unbroken, a tapestry of life and love, woven into every breath we take.
Beautiful. This has become a hobby of yours, poetry, isn't it? And yeah. And what's the one message you would give to people out of that?
Out, out of poetry or out of
Out of that poem, what in writing it, what's the message?
the message is that we are so often in action doing, and quite rightly so, that is part of our role. But actually, to be still, as I say in the poem, is to honor ourselves,
Yeah,
to give ourselves that love, that ability to reflect and nurture what we are. To renew and grow as people, we need that time to be still.
yeah, it's very, very important. That's what I took that from it, and the doing, the busyness versus taking the time to be, and that stillness. When we take the time to find that stillness, we can often be a better version of ourselves too, can't we?
Yeah. For
That
me,
great
that's
place.
where magic happens.
Yeah,
And still,
definitely.
magic comes.
Well, this has been a wonderful interview. I'm going to have to bring it to a close now. Really, really enjoyed it. I think you're very inspirational, and this heart-led leadership message. If you don't get the importance of this, just look at how Fletchers are performing as a consequence, but actually an environment that people love to be, where they can bring the best of themselves. So yeah, feed your soul and weave your tapestry, and think about be more Bridget.
Yeah.
Silent knowing, um, be still, build your raw. Great points. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to find out a little bit more about Zoe, if you and Fletchers, go to www.fletcherssolicitors.co.uk. And if you go to their /team/Zoe Holland, there's Zoe's bio in there, and I guess ways to reach. Any other link you wanted to give out, or is
Yeah.
that
Find me on LinkedIn, or the
good?
charity is www.silkelephant.co.uk.
Fantastic. And on next week's show, we have another person who's giving a huge amount of themselves to contribute to a better world. Leon Arts, a celebrity chef who has fed thousands upon thousands of people in Calais, and has done some amazing initiatives and projects. And currently, he's feeding school children and some amazing food in a school in London. But we're going to find out more about kind of kindness and giving and contribution and doing good. Because a theme for this show and a theme for the community Elevation Collective is about amplifying the good. There's so much negativity out there. We need to be focusing on great stories like Zoe and Fletcher's and Leon, because it's through podcasts that you get. I speak to great people all the time doing wonderful things, and the media doesn't pick it up. And what we can do is think that the world is a dark place when actually there's so much light going on out there. It's just that it doesn't get the light from the mainstream media. So join us again next week with Leon Arts. And once again, a big thank you to Zoe Holland. And if you've got any questions, comments, you can always drop me an email.